I got a question recently from listener and reader to Pocket Lenses, Sydney Sawyer, and he asked, is it possible to blend two pictures where the focus is on one area of a picture in one of them and in another area of the same picture on a second picture? So he sent me two pictures here, one where the background is in focus and this other one where the foreground, this wood, is in focus. And he said that he didn't do it on purpose, that it would just happen. And that can happen with a camera that is determining on its own where the focus should be. Like, you point it at the same thing, and sometimes it thinks, oh, you want to take a picture of this and that. And that can be problematic. That's one of the reasons that you really want to set your focus points on your camera. But in this case, it was a fortunate accident, because now I can show you what I would do if I wanted to get everything clear. Okay, so here are two pictures, and the first thing is that you've got two pictures. And by the way, you don't have to use Photoshop to do this. That's what I'm using right now, and there's a couple different ways. I'll show you the differences of how to do this. But all right, so I've got two pictures, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of the pictures and I'm going to drag it. So I'm just going to grab right in the center here, and I'm going to drag this picture over to the tab of the other one. So now I'm looking at the first picture, and then I'm going to put my cursor in the middle of here, and I'm going to hold the Shift key down, and as I let go, as you see over here, and if you didn't, rewind the video and you'll see that over here it just created a new layer on top of the background layer. So the background layer is one, and this other one is now sitting on top of it. This little eye icon says that that layer is being visible. If I turn the eye icon off, then now it's not being shown at all, and you're only seeing the background layer. So on, off. Another thing you can do to see both, and as you can see as I turn that on and off, they are not aligned, which is a problem. Okay, they need to be aligned. Another way that you can see that the one layer is on top of each other is right here. There's an opacity setting, and it's set at 100%. So that means this layer is at 100% opacity. So in order to see sort of through it, I'm going to make it partially transparent by sliding the opacity of the upper layer down. And as you see on the left, as I slide it to about 50%, you can already see that double shading. You can see the shoreline here and other elements like these tree branches. And you can see that the upper layer is not aligned to the lower layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the upper layer as close as I can. And if this was taken from the same vantage point, and a lot of the focal length and a whole bunch of stuff is the same, if it's close anyway, we can do the blending trick. I'm going to look for objects like this bush over here and that bush over there and this railing, which is a little hard to see. But I'm going to look for those things as sort of like landmarks. And I may have to shift it. I may have to also rotate it, but we'll see if we can get it close. And so right now I'm using an opacity of about 50% so I can see halfway through the upper layer to the lower layer. So now I'm going to take, and you have to be in the Move tool over here, where there's this cross with arrows on the ends. And I'm going to just grab this here, the upper layer. The background is locked. And I'm going to move it. So let's see if I can move the upper layer so it's close, like that. And it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. In fact, I can already tell that we're going to have some, maybe a rotational issue, because I was paying attention to this, by the way. That little bush right there is pretty darn close. But I noticed that this bush over here needs to be rotated. So in order to rotate it, I've got to turn on my transform controls over here while I'm in the move thing. Click on that, and now you've got these handles. And I could spend a lot of time telling you about this, but what you want to do is get the curved double arrow. You got to move your cursor around till you find it, okay? Because the cursor, you'll notice, changes depending on where I'm holding the thing. So you've got to get it until it gets to be the curved that thing there, and then you're gonna move it in an arc or diagonally that way, so that your whole image will pivot around the center. So here I'm going to do that there. Let's see if I can get it right there. And now I'm going to grab it, and now I'm going to move it, and I'm going to rotate it so that my shoreline more or less lines up. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I'm noticing also that as I move this, so I want my shoreline to line up, I want that second bush to line up, and I'm going to call that more or less done. I'm also noticing right here, though, that that's going to be an important element. So I'm going to actually move that down closer to that. Okay, I think we've got it about as close as we can get it on this picture. So you'll notice we've got one picture is here, and the other one is larger, or not larger, but skewed. So that's how much of a difference there is between these two pictures. I'm going to hit return. Excuse me. I'm going to hit return, but now we've got an sort of a picture here that's not being overlapped, and that's a problem because it goes from being, blurry or whatever to clear. For right now, I'm going to leave it, but later I may have to crop it within the confines of the two pictures so that there's nothing that's not overlapped, if I'm making sense. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this layer, and it's at 55%. I'm going to put it back up to 100%. So now we have it. We've got the clear background on top, and the one on top is also a blurry foreground. And then if I turn off this eye, we see that the background one has a clear foreground area, and the background is blurred. So let's turn this back on, and there are two ways here that we can, so we want this upper part here to be clear, but notice that right here is a strip of blurriness because it doesn't overlap. So that's one of the reasons we're going to want to crop it later. But I'm going to do the cropping at the very end. Let me just show the technique on how this works. So there's two ways to do this. Either I can tap on this upper layer and go to the erase tool, which is right over here, and it's let me see if I it's an erase tool. Where's that erase tool? Does it look different now? Is that it? Yeah, that's it. Okay, they changed the icon on me. Looked a little different before. Okay, so that's the erase tool, and when you have that, you can erase the parts that you don't want and show the underside. Right now, the tool is really small, so I'm going to increase the brush size like that. And I'm also going to make sure that I have the feathering on this correct. I think on this case, I'm going to want a relatively hard feathering. If it's a soft feathering, the edge of that circle is going to be soft, and it's going to be a transition between the effect and the non-effect. But if I use a hard feathering, then it'll be like right up to the edge. I'm going to use a relatively hard feathering, but I might drop it down just a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I can use the erase tool. Now watch this. It might be hard to see if let me zoom in a little bit. We've got quite a bit of okay, so right now this part is clear. Now we're only looking at the top, right? We're looking at layer 1. So if I erase layer 1, it's going to show layer 2, the background layer. So look right here where I start to erase, and you'll see it's now showing the under layer, right? Now you got to be careful, because if you go over the edge, then you notice that the water has become blurry, because in the background layer, the water was blurry. So I'm going to hit Control-Z and undo that. And you just basically want to make sure that you stay on the edge. And by the way, this is a lot harder to do if you've got something that is not a hard edge like this piece of wood. If you had a bush here or somebody's hair, it is really hard. I mean, you have to, those are advanced masking tools and how to get around leaves and hair and stuff like that. It is possible, but as you can see, it would take a long time, because even as I do the piece of wood here, you have to be really precise. If you do it well, it's not quite as detectable, but that's how it works using the erase method. This is not what I would recommend, although it's possible, and you might have to do it in certain programs that don't allow you to do what I'm about to show you. But if all you can do is erase part of the image, because right now, if I were to not show the background, you can see what I did is I turned off the background layer, so now the background is basically this transparent checkerboard thing. You can see where I've erased, actually taken away some of the, it's just sort of like I'm just cutting through that upper layer, and now it's showing whatever's through, and if what's underneath is background, it's that clear stuff. I would not suggest doing this. I'm going to show you slightly advanced, and see if I can back up through everything that I did. Okay, I think I'm back to where I didn't erase anything, and if I undo that, yeah, so I undid the background, and there's no hole now. Here's another way to do it, and you'll see why. See, once you erase and you keep moving forward with your editing, if you realize, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have erased that thing, then it's problematic. And putting back something that you erased, 3 or 7, 10 steps ago is a problem. But let me show you what I'm going to do. Down here, there's a masking tool, and if you pay attention up here when I click it. Because when I click on here, now you've got this mask, and it seemed to do nothing, right? It seemed to just put this white thing on here. Now, here's how masks work. If it is white, think of it as a piece of paper, and what it is something connected to this layer, and you have to have those little brackets around the mask to affect it. If the brackets are around the picture, what I'm about to show you is going to affect the picture, and you don't want that. You want to affect the mask. And there's only 2 things you do with a mask. You either leave it white, like a solid piece of paper, or you cut holes in it, so to speak, with a paintbrush. Okay? You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So imagine this is basically saying that the piece of paper is solid and clear. It's just like we were before. The upper part is showing. But if I go to my paintbrush tool, and the paintbrush, you probably already know this, it right over here in the corner, it will paint whatever's in that first square here, and so it will paint black. If that is red, it will paint red. If it is white, like this, it will paint white. And by the way, I just switched that by pressing the X key, because basically that's foreground, background, and whatever's in the foreground will be painted by your paintbrush here. So if you switch it with the X and you paint it now, it will then paint white as a paintbrush. So I want to paint black, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to hit X again, and now the foreground is black. So, and I have my brackets are around that white piece of paper. Now watch what happens. As I paint black on here, it's going to be like a hole in the piece of paper. You're going to see a very similar effect. Okay, so here's the thing. I am now painting black on that white bracketed area, and it is acting as though it's a hole. Okay, so, and if you look very carefully, here, let me see if I can zoom in over there. It's kind of tough to zoom in. But if you look over here, you can see sort of where the black is, which is the painted area. And what it's doing, essentially, is it is letting the background through. Now, here's the cool thing, and you'll see why it's so cool. Let's say that I accidentally, at some point, where it's nice and clear, I accidentally brush in the blurriness because I overpainted. Okay, so now the background is getting blurred. I go, oh my gosh, I need to undo that. Well, if I kept working and I can't just Control Z or undo, then it's a problem to put back an erased area. However, what you can do is paint back using white. So I'm going to switch this over here to white. So now my paintbrush is going to paint white. And you guessed it, all I'm going to do is paint where I sort of want to undo or redo the area that I made a mistake on. And you can kind of check your work over here. You can see that it's now white. So it's either white or black is what you're going to be working with masking tools. So that's it. And then, the detail. And then so if you want to paint again, you just switch this guy over here back to black. And so now it's painting that hole back in, and you just work with it that way. Okay, so I'm not going to go work on this because, as you can see, that edge here, I had to be really careful about it. The cool thing is you can really zoom in like this, right? Get into 100%, and then you can look for that edge. Make sure that your brush is as hard as possible. So and you know, you can use it as small. And then right here, I would go along that edge, make sure it's clear. And if you make a mistake and you go too much that way, then switch the color. The color black or white by hitting X, and then you now just clean that up that way. And as you can see, the better thing to do is to get it right in camera. Like if you were to use a small f-stop, an f22 and f16, where your aperture is tiny, then you might have been able to get the background and the foreground all at one time. But sometimes that's not an option. And you need to use this kind of technique. So that's the way to do it by hand. There are ways to do it automated by taking multiple shots and using stacking processes within Photoshop. But that's another way. So this is a way to do it by hand, and this is something you can do using other things besides Photoshop, like you can use GIMP and other things that allow you to put one on top of the other and either erase or use a masking tool in order to do this. I like using the masking tool because it allows you to kind of fix mistakes, and all you're doing really is painting black or white on the background. All right, there. I hope that was helpful for you, or at least gets you started on understanding how to use masks, masking tools, or erasing and layers in order to get your pictures the way you want them to look. All right, hey, for more resources to learn how to make great pictures using lightweight, agile, and nimble cameras, and also how to do post-processing, head on over to pocketlenses.com. Talk to you later.